We're lucky enough to have a terrific Melbourne writer and thinker in Monica Dux delivering today's Lunchbox Soapbox under the fabulous title of The Happy Gestator, with some myths to be exploded. You might know Monica. She was co-author of the book The Great Feminist Denial back in 2008. She's also taught history at the University of Melbourne, and she's worked for MUP and The Monthly, amongst other places. Please make Monica Dux very welcome.
Thank you for coming. I'm so glad there's people here. You always worry no one's going to turn up, because this is about birth. When I was pregnant with my first child, I attended a series of birth classes, and at the end of one session I was handed a list of the things that you might need in your labour. Now, among the obvious stuff was a kitchen strainer, and the list cryptically specified that this item would only be required if you were having a water birth. Why would I need a strainer at birth, I wondered. And then it struck me. Water birth. Strainer. To be used for removing matter from water. Floating matter. And at that moment, I discovered the horrible truth that, to put it bluntly, when you give birth, odds are you will also poo yourself. Now, when it happens, you'll also be birthing a child. So that's probably enough to distract most people from this relatively minor indignity. But in the contemporary context, I think, where fathers and support people are encouraged to attend the birth, I felt like I was being required to poo in front of a small audience, and one that would actually be eagerly videotaping the whole event. But what annoyed me most about this delightful revelation was the way I was treated when I tried to discuss my anxiety. Every midwife and obstetrician I spoke to derided my concerns as neurotic. And as one midwife clucked, "We don't care about the poo, we just wipe it away. You just think of the baby." But things went from the slightly annoying to the flat-out bizarre when I noticed that for some people, pooing was actually a thing to celebrate. Just go with it, it's natural. It's a sign that labour is going well, I was told repeatedly. And shitting during labour was not something I had to endure, but apparently was a reason to be glad. Now, this pro-poo attitude is best summed up from a comment I found online by someone who calls herself Doula Felicity. Now, Doula Felicity wasn't so much of the "we'll just wipe it away" persuasion, and more the paint your face with it and we'll do a poo-poo dance school of thought. Doula Felicity says that shitting in labour, and I quote, is part of a sublime magic act you're performing by creating, carrying, nurturing and bringing into the world the life you've begun. All the release and letting go in labour is primal, powerful and beautiful. Don't worry about it, don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, be proud. Yet as deeply as I searched my soul, I couldn't muster any enthusiasm for the idea of publicly pooing myself, and I don't care if it's a good sign. If Doula Felicity should ever attend my labour, I fear that she will dance alone. Now, I'm sorry if this talk has started off in the toilet. I said the word labour on national television yesterday, so that could get worse. But I think this poo enthusiasm is a wonderful, if extreme, example of a far more general phenomena. There's an overwhelming social expectation that pregnant women should be happy, positive and glowing about pregnancy and all that comes with it, no matter how intrinsically nasty. And I think this expectation is oppressive and a little bit sinister. Now, let me say from the outset, I was always very glad that I was having a baby. And I wasn't depressed. I was just in a bad mood. And instead of glowing, I scowled. And I think I had good reason to. Both my pregnancies were adventures in vomit, discomfort and sleepless nights. I wet myself quite often. My morning sickness was so severe that during my second pregnancy, my toddler ceased drawing pictures of trains and took to sketching mummy's vomit. I also became expert in what food groups are best to chuck. Banana smoothies have a lovely aroma on the way out. If ever you have morning sickness and you know it's coming up, banana smoothies. Don't have rolled oats, they come out like globs of glue. I endured severe constipation, except during the birth, which was such a cruel irony. I had displaced hips and relentless indigestion. And I also retained a massive amount of fluid, which swelled my face so badly that my husband innocently inquired why it was that my eyes had shrunk during my pregnancy. But my experience was in no way unique, and I think that most pregnant women have a similar list of catastrophes they could reel off if they choose to. Yet when we become pregnant, I think we're crushed by a sense that we should be beaming and not just stoically enduring. And all around us there are images of this happy gestator. She jogs, she does Pilates and prenatal yoga. She looks fantastic in all those pregnancy-hugging maternity clothes, and she is so damn happy. And not just in the I'm having a good day kind of happy, but more the, blissed out, ecstatic, I've just had an ecstasy tablet happy. So this is a topic on my soapbox. I want to champion the ones who fail to glow during their pregnancies, the incontinent, the messy, the ones who can't smile at their stretch marks or their toddler's vomit art, and the ones who, like me, would very much like to outsource the whole experience. Now, one of the first things you notice as a pregnant woman, I'm not pregnant now, of course, is that people start to smile at you a lot more when you begin to show, and there's always this expectation that you will smile back. And to really appreciate this smiling culture, it's worth taking a look at pregnancy magazines. And for those of you not familiar with pregnancy magazines, I'm sure we're all subscribers, they're a lot like ordinary women's magazines. And, the main difference is that the emaciated models in these publications are all pregnant. Now, pregnancy magazines promise you easy solutions to all your concerns, and they're inevitably encased in a sugar coating. But it's the wall of smiles in these magazines that really get to me. Now, everyone in these pregnancy magazines, and I mean everyone, is smiling, regardless of the situation they may be in. And there are three sorts you'll encounter. Now, the first is what I would describe as an ecstatic grin. It's a kind of fun-loving hooray. I just can't get enough of all these great times smile. The second one is this kind of smile of the tranquil mother. Now, with this grin, the corners of the mouth are only slightly raised, but the eyes still sparkle magically. And it's typically worn by a pregnant woman as she cradles her belly and she looks down at her bulge wistfully as if to let you know where all that happy gas is emanating from. And the third and the last smile is, to me, the most curious, but it's also the most imaginative. It's usually deployed in those less than easy moments, like, for instance, being in the final throes of agonising labour. Now, it's subtle, like smile number 2, but with just a little hint of discomfort breaking on the forehead, a little frown line that says, oops, could that be a large bony object passing through my once narrow vaginal canal? Yet throughout this, the subject still manages to look happy, and after all, she's thinking of her baby. Now, pregnancy magazines also feature real-life pregnancy stories, and they always end with triumph and happiness, never degradation and failure. But the triumph doesn't lie in the woman's ability to endure the pregnancy, but rather in the fact that she successfully produced a baby, which instantly wipes away all that she went through. Now, take the real-life story of Jan I found in one of these magazines. Now, Jan, poor Jan, she had such severe pregnancy sickness that she spent the entire 9 months vomiting, day and night. And she eventually had to be hospitalised. And finally, she was given anti-nausea drugs that she had to inject herself with daily. And these really helped, she said cheerfully. She only vomited 3 or 4 times a day after each injection. But in case you didn't realise, this is a happy story. The picture of Jan accompanying her journey is not one of her clinging to the toilet as she loses yet another meal, but one of her sitting up, beaming, deploying smile number 1, the ecstatic grin, holding the baby in her arms. The moral, of course, being, hospital schmospital, she's fine. She's just thinking of the baby. Now, of course, the happy gestator, she's not just confined to pregnancy magazines. You'll find her on pregnancy websites, in pregnancy advice books, and in the pamphlets they hand out in maternity wards. She just loves being pregnant, and she loves her rapidly changing body, and she has never felt more womanly or more beautiful. And I think pregnant women are now expected to experience their bodies as luscious and attractive. We've become this version of certified organic food. We're kind of clean and fresh and ripe. And even the bits of our life that you think would actually be interrupted by pregnancy, such as sex, are now considered to have improved. And sex for pregnant women was once considered about as safe as third trimester base jumping. But in recent years, this attitude has turned around 180 degrees. And women are now encouraged to copulate wildly, as if our wider girths and our displaced hips and our leaking bits are actually an opportunity rather than a hindrance to the best sex ever. You should feel like a sex goddess and not a walrus. And pregnancy advice manuals, they often come now with comfortable lovemaking positions, which are so graphic that I've often been surprised they're not having to be encased in plastic wrap. And your partner too, he's meant to be intoxicated by your new body and by the prospect of a threesome with you and his unborn child. As you were, Chris. Now, at the heart of all this thinly veiled glee, I think there's a real essentialism about what it is to be a woman. Birthing babies is what we're programmed to do. It's our biological destiny. So why are you resisting the changes that it brings? And if you do voice concerns or complaints, you'll find that the advice you're given is shrouded in euphemism. Labour pains are discomfort. The journey of pregnancy is a roller coaster of emotions, rather than an express train ride to Crazy Town. You'll read that your body may be changed forever. Not the more direct, after 2 babies, you could probably cover the couch with all that loose skin on your stomach. Or at least I could. It'd be very rippled from all the stretch marks. Look, if you do insist on whinging about the adventure of pregnancy, it may indicate that you have a mental illness. Expressing disdain for your body when you're pregnant is a big no-no, a sign of body image dysmorphia and self-esteem issues. Countless web pages insist that you should seamlessly embrace your rapidly changing body, as if self-image is completely malleable. Yet isn't it normal to be slightly discomforted by profound and rapid physical change? And a pregnant woman's emotional state has become one of the big issues in recent years. And in answer to feelings of anxiety, concern and worry, we are given the simple exhortation to relax. And it's a kind of Nike just do it ad that pregnant women are told, just relax, which is something you should never really say to a hormonal woman. And if you refuse to comply, well, then that's a serious matter. Now, I'm about to read the questions used in an online survey for pregnant women, and these were developed by a Dr. Calvin Hobel, who is the Director of Maternal Fetal Medicine at some fancy hospital in the USA. Now, you have to answer yes, sometimes or no to these questions, and if you answer sometimes or yes to 3 or more questions, says Dr. Hobel, you may have sufficient stress to warrant some form of counselling or intervention. And he concludes ominously, please consult your healthcare provider. So let's just see how we all do. Question 1, and remember it's 3. 3 maybes or yeses and you're out, or you're getting intervention. Question 1, I feel tense, yes, sometimes or no. Well, sometimes. I feel nervous, sometimes. I feel worried, sometimes. So that's 3, so I'm already out, but let's keep going. I feel frightened, sometimes. I have trouble dealing with problems. Yes. Things are not going well. Sometimes. I cannot control things in my life. Yes. I'm worried that my baby is abnormal. Yes. I've had them. I'm concerned that I may lose my baby. Sometimes. I'm concerned that I will have a difficult delivery. Yes. I'm concerned that I will be unable to pay my bills. Yes. And it goes on. There's a lot more of those questions, but I failed it very early on. Now, if you are a pregnant woman doing this survey, you're about to have a baby, for goodness sake. You're not sometimes just a little bit stressed and worried. I failed this test now and I've had my babies. This survey, it represents a sharp end of the pregnancy happiness culture. And if you do refuse to comply, you're pathologised and you need treatment. But I think we experience negative emotions for a reason. Yet women are never told that their confusion, their anxiety, their fear, their anger, their desire to throw things across the room are not only well-founded but inevitable and perhaps worthwhile. And dismissing these emotions with banal solutions such as go shopping, get a facial, that dreadful term, pamper yourself, it not only denies women their experience and it doesn't make them just feel guilty for not being on top of it all, I think it also neutralises and possibly tranquillises their ability to process this magical journey and work out what exactly they want from the experience. Now, examining the happiness oeuvre, that's such a big word, that infects pregnancy, It's easy to see the connections, I think, to our broader culture of positivity. And it's something that the social commentator Barbara Ehrenreich has brilliantly demolished recently in her book Smile or Die. Now, Ehrenreich opens by relating her experience of being diagnosed with breast cancer. And she went online to find some support, and she expected that her own feelings of fear and anger and anxiety would be reflected in a lot of the advice that people were sharing with each other. But instead, all the advice she received insisted that she should just be positive. And if she wasn't, it was implied that there was something terribly wrong with her. And being positive, she was told, could even cure her cancer. And by the way, this claim that a positive attitude can result in greater cancer survival rates has been clinically disproven, but it's a widely accepted truism. Anyway, similarly, much pregnancy advice, I think, implores women to remain positive and relaxed and unstressed for the sake of their health. And just in case the positivity carrot isn't working for you, they've recently started using a stick. It's now being claimed that by frowning through pregnancy, you could be harming your baby. And questionable scientific studies have indicated that getting stressed while you're pregnant could cause your child to be a slow learner, to suffer from asthma, diabetes, autism. And it's just as bad as if you get angry, which is a way of life for most of the pregnant women I've known. Losing your temper could curse your child with a weakened heart. Both my children are doomed. But if you take a look at the data in these studies, I think you'll quickly see that the evidence is flimsy at best. Perhaps it's true that a group of pregnant lab rats who were tortured twice a day ended up delivering more compromised offspring than their untortured sister rats. This does not mean that your child will develop asthma just because you found it stressful moving house when you were 8 months pregnant. Yet such claims make gripping headlines, and it's not just because we're all horrified at the thought that by refusing to do yoga we could be harming our fetuses, but also because we've become so accustomed to the idea of accepting that being positive, relaxed and happy is in and of itself a good thing. So doesn't it make sense that the reverse of these superlative emotions could actually be harming our babies? Now, there's probably a few of you out there who are thinking, what a miserable bitch Monica Dux is. I'm sure she's great in bed, but, what's wrong with all this smiling? Nobody likes a whinger. But I do think there is something wrong with smiling when it becomes the only legitimate option. As Barbara Ehrenreich says, we've gone so far down this yellow brick road that positive seems to us not only normal, but normative, the way you should be. And being positive doesn't simply leave the smiler basking in uncomplicated happiness. To the positive thinker, Ehrenreich says, emotions remain suspect and one's inner life must be subjected to endless monitoring. And this is especially so in the case of pregnancy. A pregnant woman must be especially vigilant to her emotions. And this endless self-monitoring is exhausting. But it's not just the happiness levels that need to be watched. In fact, I think there's a nasty flip side to all this smiling. At the same time that pregnant women are being force-fed this image of the happy gestator, they're also bombarded with a culture of fear and anxiety, which creates pressure to maintain a constant vigilance against a whole range of threats that we're told could be harming our unborn. And the big ones, of course, are the food warnings, which have multiplied in recent years. Now, most pregnant women live in dread of listeria, a foodborne bacteria that can cause serious complications in pregnancy. Yet the incidence of listeria in Australia is extremely low, and nonetheless, the encyclopedic list of foods that might harbour it is burnt into most pregnant women's minds, leaving us cringing at the thought of a simple green salad in a restaurant, much less the terrifying possibility that a piece of salami might, accidentally pass our lips. Now, in Australia today, we've got access to wholesome fresh food, uncontaminated water, universal healthcare. Julia Gillard is our Prime Minister. But the chances of birthing a healthy baby have actually never been better. Yet the perceived threat levels have never been higher. There's the filthy air we breathe, the paint fumes from the new nursery, whether we do too much or too little exercise, the cosmetics we wear, and of course, whether or not you lost your temper. And then there's a brilliant little piece of advice that if you sleep on your right side rather than your left, you could be compromising the blood flow to your fetus. How many women are torturing themselves through their pregnancies as they stoically refuse to turn over in bed, fearing that Junior might miss some vital nutrients and so fail to fulfil his destiny as the next Mozart? Now, if you ask our modern-day oracle, the internet, about even the most seemingly innocent behaviour, chances are that there will be an alarming response. Now, I tried this one out. Can I get a manicure when I'm pregnant? Now, I did expect that there would be a warning about the fumes from all that nail polish, and perhaps a study where, pregnant rats were bathed twice daily in nail varnish, and they eventually produced young who weren't as, didn't show as much aptitude on the treadmill. But no, it's actually far worse. Those nail files that the beautician uses could be lethal. A couple of websites insisted that I take my own instruments, nail file, cuticle clippers, etc. And why? To reduce the risk of infection. You wonder then, should you bring your own cutlery when you go to a restaurant? Your own scissors when you get your hair cut, your own toilet paper when you go to the loo, maybe your own scalpel when you go to the birthing suite in case you end up needing a Caesar. Better still, why don't we hermetically seal pregnant women in bubbles? Although I'm sure they would soon find out that the plastic emits some toxins that could be harming Junior. Basically, whatever you do, you're rooted. Now, it might look as if these two phenomena, that of the happy gestator and our culture of pregnancy alarm, are antithetical. But I contend that they are in fact expressions of the same thing. The happiness imperative is just the cosmetic surface appearance of a much broader ranging phenomena. This regimen of enforced happiness and the culture of fear work closely together in all kinds of different ways. And I believe that the happiness industry needs all these manufactured fears and alarms that it apparently keeps under bay and under control. And the two work together and they feed off each other, with poor old pregnant women being a particularly vulnerable target. But whatever's going on, I'm here today to plead for a fair go for the miserable ones. Can't we allow pregnancy to be unenjoyable? Can't we scowl? Can't it be stressful, alienating, foul and complaint-worthy without pregnant women having to be counselled, coddled and told that they need to talk to someone about all of this? Can't I lie down weeping when I feel like weeping? And can't you all leave us alone and stop trying to tell us to be so damn happy? Thank you.
Monica would be very happy to take a couple of questions. Ecstatic, even. Does anyone have any questions or even comments from their own experience? There is a mic making the rounds.
Monica, I was wondering if you'd given any thought to the politics and discourses surrounding breastfeeding during pregnancy, which seem to be quite prevalent. I'm 7 months pregnant at the moment, and it's something I've observed prior to becoming pregnant as well, that the idea of a woman's right to choose has actually been diminished over the last decade or so, I would say.
With breastfeeding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think there's I have breastfed both my children, but I found that I had problems for the first couple of weeks for both of them, and they were quite catastrophic problems. Like, I think women often, when they start breastfeeding, get told continuously, it's great, it's great, it's great. And I think breastfeeding is great if you can do it, but I think it's very hard sometimes to do it, and women have to continue breastfeeding when they shouldn't be. And we had a funny experience with my second, that we had all these problems with the tongue, and I actually have something, I can't... It's terrible. But I was laughing with my husband, we were going to the clinic, and because I'd already breastfed at first and had similar problems, I knew what was going on. But there was this, it was like my sense of, my right to choose. I knew I was going to breastfeed, but I felt so patronised, and I kept being told what a good mother I was. I was sitting there thinking, I'm a good mother, like I've had a baby, I know what's going on. I also had this experience where my nipples were bleeding, and they keep wanting you to feed that baby as if they don't trust that you will not, work out some other way of doing it, which you can. So I do think there's a real culture of that, and I think it just ends up making women feel guilty and very isolated when things do go wrong. Anyway.
I'll put my hand up and say that men are the worst in the world at making anyone feel guilty. But I just wanted to qualify something that you've said about stress. I think there are two sorts of stress we're talking about in pregnancy, and one is traumatic stress. which was first identified in Czechoslovakia in 1963.
It was a bad year.
It was a bad year.
Very stressed.
And likewise in Basra last year, and women who have got guns and things shooting around their head certainly are traumatised by this. Now, there are some women in Australia too who suffer traumatic stress. By that I mean a husband might say, well, it's either me or the baby. And there I do believe that there is an issue with stress, and Southern Cross University at the moment are exploring that in traumatic stress and how that affects the nutritional flow into the fetus.
I think that's an extremely valid point. Like, I think that there is a kind of extreme stress, just like with postnatal depression. You know, I think often after women have babies, they're quickly pathologised if they're just having a bad time. A lot of the stress stuff that goes to the media isn't talking about women in high trauma. What it is talking about is women who just feel a little bit stressed. It actually is translated as ordinary women having a bad week and how that will hurt their fetus.
Do you think this rally to be happy that you're talking about is connected also with the conspiracy of silence? And perhaps that runs to society's need to prevent the news getting out so that, you know, we don't die off as a species.
Well, yeah.
I had 10 months of vomiting and 3 days of labour, and I think that was highly stressful. And
Well,
and I was angry that nobody had told me that it's so painful you think you're going to die, you know. And people are still embarrassed to say that. So
yeah, and I found with my morning sickness when I was first pregnant, it was shocking. And all the all the chat sites, I could find all these women who are online having these extremely catastrophic experiences, but all the advice is so lame, and you're not taken seriously. You know, I went to my GP when I was like 8 weeks pregnant with my first, and she was like, it's just morning sickness. You know, I was thinking, I can't function. And I do think there is a thing of that you're just meant to put up with it. And because if we don't, then we have to start asking for more. So yeah, I do think it's a bit of a feminist conspiracy.
It's a perennial issue, but what was your experience during pregnancy on public transport?
Oh, see, this is, I was... Look, a few times I felt people wouldn't give me seats. I feel like there's a sense that I was meant to... it's that sense of being fabulous. And I could be... I don't want to straw poll myself, but I did feel like I wonder if 20 years ago I would have got a bit more attention. You know, as a pregnant woman, it's just meant to slot in there. I got a lot of smiles too, which I didn't appreciate.